So without further ado, I'll introduce our next speaker. So joining us from the US, Anthony Fasano is a best-selling author. He is a TEDx speaker. He is a trainer and executive coach for engineers, and he is the founder of the Engineering Podcast, the Career Coach Podcast. It's something which I actually came across a little over a year ago, which I sort of found myself getting hooked on quite quickly, and that's what led me to ask Anthony to share some of his views and thoughts with this forum today. First thing I'd like to say directly to Anthony is thank you ever so much for your time, especially given the time of day you're doing this at. So I'll hand over to you now, and I hope everyone enjoys this talk as much as I know I'm going to.
Great, thanks so much, Gary. Thank you to the entire Chain group for having me on here and allowing me to be part of this event. I'm very passionate about helping engineers succeed in their careers, especially helping younger engineers get started on the right track. That's why I think that this is a great event, a great initiative, and I'm happy just to be a part of it. I hope you all had a great day so far. I know you had a lot of interesting presentations. I was lucky to meet some of the speakers and some of our prep, and I hope that I can add some more value to your day today and really to your career going forward. And I will introduce myself in a minute, just give you a little bit of my career background, my engineering background. But really what we're going to focus on in my session here is how to set yourself up for success in your career as an engineer by developing people skills. People skills are critical to what we do as engineering professionals because we're constantly working with people. And in fact, I've had the opportunity through all of our different podcasts and YouTube channels to interview many, many successful engineers, CEOs, executives. And what they always tell me is they're constantly looking for engineers that have people skills when they hire people. And it's really difficult to find them. However, hopefully with some of the tips I'm going to share with you today, you're going to be able to build those skills. Now, before we jump in, I do want to start off with this quote. This was from one of our subscribers who sent this to me, which I thought was great. And the quote is, "Every journey begins with the first step, only if you take it." And the reason that I say that is because you're all getting a lot of great information today. Hopefully you're taking some notes, getting some new ideas out of this, coming up with some plans of things you'd like to do. But at the end of the day, if you sit here all day, listen, but don't take action, it's not really going to help you. So I've kind of broken my presentation down today into 4 different components, which I'll walk you through in a minute so that hopefully you can grab something from each one and try to apply it in your career going forward. And really, this is just, I think, a general good lesson in your career and life is that if you want to succeed, it's great to get information. There's plenty of information out there today, but you also have to then implement that information and use it effectively to achieve the goals that you have in your career. So just kind of keep that in mind today as we were talking here for a little while, and also keep that in mind beyond today. All right, so real quick, let me just give you my background so you understand where I'm coming from. I am located here over in the United States. I'm in the New York City area. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in civil engineering. I also have a professional engineering license here in the US. And for me, when I started working for a consulting engineering firm out of school, I knew right away that I wanted to become a partner in the firm or an owner in the firm. And so I looked at the other owners that were out there in the company, across the company, and I noticed a pattern. In addition to their technical skills, they had really sound management skills. They could communicate effectively. They could go out there and network and bring in new business for the firm. They knew how to delegate to others. They knew how to lead projects effectively. And so I just thought to myself, if I want to be able to do this, I need to get out there and build these skills. So I kind of took every course I could. I read every book I could. I watched every video online that I could, and I developed these skills. And essentially what happened for me was my career took off. And one day my boss approached me and said, "Anthony, we really like what you're doing. Do you think you could go around and teach the other engineering professionals in our company these skill sets?" And so my answer was no, I can't. I'm an engineer. I'm not a trainer. But eventually I did convince myself to build to go build a training curriculum and go around to these offices and give the training. And basically 2 things happened for me. One, I absolutely love doing it. But secondly, we got results. We saw better communication internally, better communication with clients, and just better project performance overall. So I knew right there that this is something I wanted to do more of. So I enrolled in executive coaching school in the evenings. I joined a Toastmasters group, started learning how to speak more effectively, and I built an internal management and leadership training program within the company to help them work on these people-related skills, people interaction skills. And the program went great, but after a year, I thought to myself, if there's this many people in one company struggling with these skill sets, there must be thousands of people out there, engineering professionals out there in the world struggling with the same skill sets. So in 2009, I left my engineering career. I started what is today the Engineering Management Institute. I wrote a book called Engineer Your Own Success, and I've traveled around the United States and beyond to help engineering professionals become better leaders through developing these skill sets. And so what I found is that these skill sets will differentiate you greatly because not a lot of engineering professionals take the time to develop them. And so we're going to talk about that, of course, today. But I also want to let you know that if you go to our website, engineeringmanagementinstitute.org, like Gary said, we have 4 podcasts, 3 YouTube channels, all free content, all free information for you that can help you to build these skills. All right, so we're going to cover some of the components I list or talk about in my book, Engineer Your Own Success, this morning. I'm going to talk about how finding a mentor can help you tremendously in your career, how to improve your communication skills. I think a lot of people tell you need to become a good communicator as an engineer, but they don't tell you how. So I want to try to tell you how you can do that today. We'll talk about building effective and productive time management habits, right? In your career, you really need to manage your time effectively and make sure you're working on the right things. So I'll give you a recipe for that. And then we'll end off by talking a little bit about networking. Networking is important in your career because networking and the relationships that you build will bring about opportunities for you. And of course, if you have questions along the way, you can put them in the chat and I can incorporate them and talk about them as we go through. All right, so the first point I'm going to cover today is finding a mentor. Finding a mentor is really, really important. And do me a favor, if you don't mind, go into the chat right now if you have a mentor and just type yes. I'd like to get a feel for how many of us have a mentor already in your careers. A mentor is someone that can really help you to expedite your career progressions because they've kind of been through a career already or been through some stages like you, and they can provide you with the advice. All right, so it's really, really important to have a mentor in your career, and I see some yeses coming through, so it's great to see people have mentors here. So let's talk a little bit about the mentoring relationship. Pretty much the way that should look is it should look like having one consistent meeting on a regular basis with that mentor, maybe once a month, ideally, or once every couple of weeks or once every 2 months if you can't make it happen every month. But whatever it is, it has to be done consistently, right? It's like I tell people all the time, anything in life or in your career that you want to improve, you want to build, you want to take success out of it, has to be consistent, right? You can't sign up for a gym membership, go, once in a while and have success. You need to go consistently, right? And the same thing is true for a mentorship program. And this could be a simple phone call once a month where you catch up with your mentor, ask some questions, get some advice on where you're at right now. The other important aspect of a mentoring relationship is it needs to be confidential. And the reason I say that is because you might be dealing with challenges. I mean, we all have challenges we face in our career. We all have personal struggles, maybe some skills we feel like we really need to improve on, but we're not comfortable talking about it with people. You need to be comfortable talking about those things with a mentor. Right. This is also important in mentor selection because if you select your supervisor in your own company to mentor you and you have an issue with that person and you can't feel confidential, you don't feel like you're having a confidential conversation, or you have an issue with someone else in the company, you might not feel comfortable. So it might actually be better to have someone that you meet through chain or through another organization rather than the supervisor, or have multiple mentors. So let's talk a little bit about getting the most out of your mentor. I mean, of course, you want to be really focused in the sessions you have with your mentor to get the most out of that person and that relationship. You want to bring questions to the table, maybe keep notes in between your meetings that you can ask. However, the most important thing is that you need to pick the right person to be your mentor, right? That's the biggest thing. If you do that wrong, you're probably not going to get a lot of value out of the mentoring relationship. So let me pose this question to you here. Who would make a good mentor for you? Go ahead and put some answers and thoughts in the chat, and I'll pause for a minute. Who would make a good mentor for you? Who might make a good mentor for you in your career as an engineer? Okay, someone who understands your underlying ambitions. That would be good, right? If they know kind of what you're focused on, they could potentially help you. So here's the answer I'm going to give you. It's a little different than that one, or a little, I guess it can build on that. Just find someone who has achieved the goals similar to those you are pursuing. So yeah, it's good for someone to find someone that understands your goals, but it's even better to find someone that's achieved those goals already, right? If you find someone who is already there, right? They can greatly reduce the time that it will take you to get there because they've done it already and they can kind of give you the recipe, right? That doesn't mean that you'll be able to copy exactly what they do, but you'll be able to really use that framework, right? There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. So you really want to look for someone. And I see some other comments coming in here, someone with great connections with senior directors. Okay, so certainly someone that has a network could be helpful. Someone with a wide range of life and professional experience could be helpful. But the thing to remember with all those answers is it's only really helpful if their network or their experiences are going to help you. And they're only likely going to help you is if they're in your space, right? And I would even say someone in your specific industry, right? So if I'm a civil engineer and I work in transportation, I don't just want to find a civil engineer. I want to find a civil engineer working in transportation. That's really going to maximize my results. And it's going to really work in both directions, because if I have someone that's really good fit for me, I'm going to take value out of it, and they're also going to feel like they're giving value out of it, which is an important thing for them in the mentoring relationship. One last thing to consider here is, like I said earlier, you really need to consider how comfortable you might be discussing an uneasy situation with this person. Right? You may ask about salary negotiation or conflicts. You may ask about a conflict with another member of the team or another person in your company, and you want to feel comfortable. So I always recommend to engineers, your supervisor should, in a sense, be a default mentor to you, right? He or she should be able to give you advice, but you should also maybe find someone else outside of the organization you work for so that you can have honest and open conversations with them about your progress in the workplace. And my last point here on mentoring is it's important to also become a mentor at any point in your career, because it allows you not only to give back to the community and help another engineering professional, but it allows you to build important leadership skills and grow your confidence. And I think people forget that. And I think one thing to think about is you could be a student who's a senior in engineering school, or you're about to graduate and finish your studies. There's a younger student that could still use your help. So my point is that you can mentor at any age. You don't have to be a very experienced engineer to become a mentor. There's always someone who's less experienced than you. I see a comment here coming in from Francis. I have multiple mentors depending on what I can learn from them and to get a diverse range of opinions of situations that I need advice on. That's a great strategy. Does anybody have any questions or comments on mentoring before we move on to improving your communication skills? Oh, here's a great question. How do you find a mentor? All right, so excellent question. So the first thing you could do is check within your company. If you're employed by an engineering organization, many organizations do have mentoring programs where they can connect you with other professionals. And like I said before, you may not want to only have an internal mentor, but if you work for a large enough company, you could also have a mentor in another part of your country or region that you can still feel comfortable talking about items within your office specifically. Also, professional associations do have mentoring programs. I know that I'm a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers, for example, and they have a mentoring program. I know that there's an organization called ICE in the UK. I'm not sure if they have a mentoring program, but whatever your professional association is, you can check with them. And then lastly, if those don't work out, you can use online tools like LinkedIn, for example, which I'm going to talk to you about today a little bit, where you can connect with someone who might be a potential mentor and just ask them if they'd be willing to jump on a call with you once a month. Someone in your region, in your area. I think that that's important. Another question, what advice would you give someone who has experienced a bad mentor and has lost confidence in finding the right mentor? It's an excellent question, and it may happen. I mean, listen, it's not easy to find the best fit all the time. I would say that you're better off trying and having a bad experience than not trying at all, right? I mean, in our career, in our lives, we need to go through experiences. We need to experience things that don't work out to help us learn lessons and get better. And so what I would say to that person is, reflect on the bad experience you had. Think about what made it bad. Was it the person? Was it their personality? Did you pick them from the wrong location? Were they not experienced enough? Make notes, reflect on it, and then use those notes and try again, right? Make improvements based on what happened last time. I think that that's a really important way to do it. Great question. Thanks for asking. All right, I'm going to move on to our next topic here so we can keep going, and I'm going to talk about how you can improve your communication skills. I think it's safe to say that communication is probably the most important skill set that engineering professionals need beyond their technical skills because of the kind of work we do. You will likely work on project teams that consist of other engineers, technical professionals, other consultants, and therefore your ability to communicate effectively really will drive the success of you, your projects, and ultimately your career. And becoming good at communication will absolutely differentiate you and help you to contribute to your success significantly. Because like I said earlier, a lot of engineering professionals don't get taught these skills, which means they're not good at them. So there are many different forms of communication, okay? And one of your responsibilities as an engineering professional today is to understand which form of communication to use in every single situation, right? So let's say you have a time-sensitive piece of information and you need to communicate that to a customer, to a client, to a colleague, to a vendor, and you decide to send them an email. However, this specific person doesn't check email. They just answer the phone, or they go by text messages or instant messages or whatever the case may be, right? And then they don't get the information and they don't get back to you and the project gets delayed. That's your fault, okay? Because you need to understand your clients or your customers or the people that you work with. So in terms of effective communication, remember that the first step is always to understand what form of communication works best in every single situation. And this is something that you didn't always have to think about as an engineer because there wasn't so many different avenues of communication like there are now. Another piece of advice that I'd like to give you in terms of improving communication skills is to communicate early and often on projects. Doing this will save your company most likely a lot of time and a lot of money, and it's going to help you to serve your clients, your customers, or other stakeholders better. And it's really just going to make you a better engineering professional overall. So for example, let's say that you're working on a project with a customer, and there's some very detailed specifications. And at the beginning of the project, there are a couple of different design alternatives that you could take, a couple of different approaches, right? Often in engineering, there are many ways to solve a problem. And so you select one of those approaches, you spend 40 hours on a design, and you show it to your client. And the client says, that's not the approach I wanted to take. I wanted to take the other approach. Well, guess what? You just cost your company and the project 40 hours worth of work on the budget because your client's not going to pay for that time. You should have confirmed that approach with them beforehand. And I'll give you another benefit of this approach is that it allows you to get buy-in from people on your projects. And when I say buy-in, I mean when you ask someone for their input on something, they become a part of the project. They take ownership of that project. And I'll give you another example here. As a civil engineer, I worked on a lot of public projects where all of the citizens who lived around the projects were involved because they were concerned about their properties, their neighborhoods. And so they would often come out and they would want to attack us. Hey, you're ripping up our neighborhood, you're causing all this construction and stress for everyone. So what we would do is we would go to them early on, way before the project, and then we would ask them questions about how they wanted to see this project done, what would make this project most successful for them. And they appreciated that. And instead of then going against the project, they would work with us to help us streamline it and bring the best result about for them because we cared and because we asked them about it. That's a really important aspect of communication. All right, so I also want to take a minute here to talk about listening. All right, and I know you might be thinking, listening. Well, listening is a big part of communication. In fact, I often tell engineers, listening is communicating. Listening is communicating. A lot of times when you hear the word communication, you immediately think talking or speaking, right? But communication is a two-way street. Talking or speaking is part of it, but there has to be someone on the other end listening. Many engineers just don't listen effectively. I spend a lot of time coaching executives and leaders in engineering, and often I interview their staff when I start the process and I ask them, what would you wish your manager did differently? And often their response is, I wish that he or she would listen better. My manager cuts me off all the time. They don't let me finish what I'm saying. And I've thought about this a lot, and I really think I can kind of justify why we as engineering professionals do this. We're very analytical. We're trained to solve problems. So as soon as you tell me one of your problems, my mind starts working. I start coming up with solutions, and I just want to spit them out and share them with you immediately. However, research has shown that by doing this, you are disempowering the other person because you are taking control of the conversation. So it's better to remain calm and quiet and never talk over people. Cutting people off demonstrates a real lack of respect. And since I want today to be about you taking action on the advice that I'm giving you, I want to give you a solid framework, which consists of 2 actions that you can take to listen more effectively immediately. The first is to listen for silence. What does that mean? Imagine that you're in a conversation with someone, you're interacting back and forth with them, and think about when they're talking. At some point, it will be your turn to speak. I want you to make sure that you hear at least 1 second of silence like this. By listening for that silence, you're forcing yourself to wait for the other person to completely finish their sentence or thought. And this is a very powerful strategy that will change your conversations. The second action you can take is to acknowledge people by repeating some of the words that they have used back to them in your response. For example, if a customer calls me and says, Anthony, we really got to get this project done on time. It's a really, really important deadline for us for multiple reasons. It has to be done on time. I might respond and say, hey, listen, Gary, we know this is a really important project for you. That's why we have our best engineers working on it, and we will get it done on time. So I'm acknowledging him by repeating some of his words back to him, and I'm reinforcing his own thoughts. And this strategy makes people feel good about the conversation, and it confirms that you're really listening to them, which is really important, especially subconsciously as they are making decisions or judgments about you as a person and as a professional. Right? So these couple of steps here can be super critical in terms of you improving your communication skills. And when people say you need to become a better communicator and they don't tell you how to do it, improving your listening skills and taking these steps will help you become a better communicator. All right, I want to talk for a minute here about responsiveness, right? Responsiveness impacts your reputation significantly. Right? If you don't get back to people in a timely manner, they will look down on you and your company. Now, I know we live in a world where everybody wants responses immediately, and that's not always fair, right? You can't be glued to your phone 24/7, nor should you. However, my recommendation is that in terms of professional communications with clients and customers and vendors and colleagues, is to try to respond to them as soon as you can, even if you don't have the answer right away. right? So I may say something like, listen, I understand, I hear you. I know you need this information. This is some complex calculations involved. So it's going to take a day or two to do the calcs, but in a couple of days, I will get back to you, right? By making that initial call back and letting them know that, or emailing them back initially and saying, I've got your message, going to work on it, we'll get back to you, you make them feel better. They feel like they're being heard. And that in itself is going to do a lot for your reputation, for your relationship with that person. The CEO of the engineering company that I used to work for, he always used to tell us, if you're not responsive, next time they're not going to be calling you, or in that case, us as a company to do work for them. Another point I want to drive home to you this morning is that honesty is the best policy. I know it's a cliche, it's a saying, you hear it all the time. But what happens in engineering, especially for younger engineers, is you often get pressure from clients, right? They want a job done quickly, they got a budget, they got a tight schedule, and they're on top of you to get something done, and they might ask you to do something that you can't do. So for example, when I was practicing as an engineer and I got my first job as an engineering manager, a project manager, I really wanted to do well on this project. So the client called me up one day and said, Anthony, I need you to do this plan for me by tomorrow. And I knew in my head that we couldn't get that plan done by tomorrow. It just wasn't going to be possible. But I just said, sure, yeah, no problem. We'll have it done. So the next day came. We didn't have the plan. He was extremely mad. It looked terrible for me. It looked terrible for my boss. It looked terrible for my company. And I learned a very valuable lesson that day, which is you need to be honest with people, even if it's not what they want to hear, but it will make sure that you have a good long-term relationship with those people. So what I would say to that person the next time around was, I know you need this plan tomorrow, and believe me, I want to get it done for you, but it usually takes us a couple of days to do something like this the right way, and we want to do it the right way for you. So we'll do it as fast as we can. It's probably going to take 2 days, but I'll keep you updated and I'll let you know as soon as we're ready for you. All right, and that's how I approach those, and doing that helped me to build some very good long-term relationships, and I continue to use those actions and that strategy today. All right, last thing I want to just mention on communication skills, if there was only one thing that you could practice in your career as an engineer, I would recommend that it be your presentation skills and build them. I'm not going to go into details on this today. I can't, because I have a whole hour session on public speaking, but a couple of reasons that it's important is it can help you in terms of facilitating projects and getting approvals on them and moving projects through. It can help you to bring in work for your firm if you're tasked with that in the future. It definitely helps you to build your leadership skills and get promoted faster, because the ability to present and speak to people, and overall it just builds your confidence. And I can teach you all these skills today, and you can learn a lot through all the sessions here today, but if you don't build your confidence, you're not going to be able to execute on these skill sets. And that's really important. All right, so I'm not going to be able to go in detail today, but what I will tell you is if you go to our website at engineeringmanagementinstitute.org, you'll find in the right sidebar, you will see a search bar. If you type "wow the crowd" there, you'll find my guide on public speaking for engineers. It's about a 10 or 12 page post. It's very comprehensive. You can print it out, you can bookmark it and go through it as you see fit, but it certainly will help you to get going in the right direction in terms of public speaking skills. And please don't sleep on this skill set. Even if you never have to speak in public, you should still develop these skills. All right, so I'm going to pause there for a minute, see if we have any questions on communication or any other questions. And I do see one that came in here. Question is, what do you think, if best mentoring is enough to help to engineering student or a young engineer to develop professional skills and qualifications? I mean, mentoring will definitely help you with these skill sets, but it's not enough. I mean, you need to take courses on communication, read books, learn how to become a better public speaker, like I mentioned here. It's not just the mentoring. Mentoring can help you and they can provide advice to you, but they're not going to build the skills for you. That's something that you're going to have to do, right? But a mentoring can help you to do that. Good question. Any questions or comments on communication skills?
Not directly on communication, but there was another comment / question, actually. I will have to just read it through, if that's okay with you, Anthony.
Yeah, sure.
since you asked the question. The description of an engineer has been an ongoing battle between people working in engineering and professional engineers. My experience, they say obviously, early on has been that getting academically qualified as man in UK was not seen as playing the game. You were going above your station, i.e. exposing less driven people. It's only lately that having academic qualifications, and if you are brave, a professional brave, then a professional registration is starting to become acceptable with other men. Women tend to be very educated or highly respected, learning, and now have a double hurdle to jump through. And Anastasia obviously touched on this point quite significantly, so he's obviously agreeing to that as well. What are your thoughts?
So it sounds to me like the question is around, do you need to be certified or get any kind of license or credential to really be considered as an engineer? Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it could be regionally specific. I was just working with a company on something like this because they had someone titled as an engineer who didn't have an engineering degree, and they were gonna change that. We have laws here in the United States, in some states, that specify when and how you can be called an engineer. If you have a license, if you have a degree. And I do think that's important because I think the word engineer is a powerful word. It's an important designation and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And there should be some kind of requirement around what you need to be able to call yourself that. And again, I think it's regional. I think you'd have to check with your education departments in the UK. You'd have to check with your licensing, whoever does licensing there, and have a conversation with them about it. But I know here in the US, we do have some guidelines around that. And even with companies too, if you want to offer engineering services, you have to have a licensed professional as an owner of that company. So that's my thoughts on that question for now. If you have additional questions on it, I could try to take it at the end of today.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yep. All right, I'm going to keep going here. We still got a bit to cover here in the last, I guess, 20, 25 minutes or so here. So as engineers and technical professionals, you're going to be tasked with a lot of work, a lot of project tasks, right? And I know we all want to accomplish a lot every day, right? We like to feel very efficient, and we want to get a lot done. So I want to share with you a little bit of a quote here as we get into the section on time management from Peter Drucker. He's a great he was one of the greatest management consultants, and this is my favorite quote probably. Efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right things. So right, you could have this long to-do list every day. You could go through it. You could check off a bunch of things and you could feel really good about it. But if you're not working on the right things, does it really matter? Right? So you have to make sure that you're working on the right things to be effective, not just do a lot of things to make you feel efficient. All right. So I want to talk about time management and productivity here for the next 10, 15 minutes or so, because it is really important. So the first thing I want to mention here is being physically organized can really help you to be mentally organized and maintain a clear mind, right? So for example, if you're surrounded by clutter on your desk, it may impact your ability to think clearly, right? If you have 300 emails in your inbox, regardless of how unimportant they are, they will certainly weigh on your mind and again, reduce your ability to think clearly. So what I really want to do in the segment here on time management and productivity is give you some strategies for try to stay organized and reduce stress in your career. Now, before I do that, I want to ask you a question. I'm going to get into the 80-20 rule a little bit here, also known as the Pareto principle. If you've heard of this rule, I would ask you to just type in the chat yes, and let me know that you've heard of the Pareto principle.
Sorry, Anthony, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm on mute here. So we got a few yeses and a few nos, so I'm going to take a minute to explain it because it's really important. In fact, it may be the most important concept that I cover in the session today here, all right? So in order to be productive, you want to kind of deploy this minimalist mindset, right? Like I said, you want to focus on what matters. And so to stress the importance of this action, I need to talk about the 80-20 rule, or like I said, it's a nickname for something called the Pareto principle. This rule came from the research of an Italian economist, Vilfredo Pareto, in the late 1800s, okay? Pareto was studying actually the distribution of wealth in the United Kingdom. And he noticed that roughly 20% of the people that lived in the UK possessed 80% of the money or the wealth. So next he decided to investigate land ownership in his home country of Italy. And he noticed again, approximately 20% of Italians possessed 80% of the land in the country. And so he thought that this was a pretty interesting pattern that kept repeating kind of in his research. And so he's like, you know what, I'm going to look at something much more mundane. And he took a look at his own vegetable garden. And he noticed that approximately 20% of the garden yielded 80% of the vegetables. He kept finding these 80-20 ratios in his research. And maybe sometimes it was 70-30 or even 65-35, but it was always kind of relatively close to this 80-20 split. So he essentially produced the Pareto principle, which was also known as the law of vital few, or the principle of factor sparsity. And what this rule states is that for many events, roughly 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. So let's translate this into something that you can use daily in your career and in your life. Roughly 80% of the success in your career and in your life comes from 20% of your efforts. So imagine that you could just focus on the 20% of your efforts that are driving the 80% of your results. It would be an absolute game changer. Just think about that for a minute. This can apply to you and can apply to a company, right? And to give you a couple quick examples of this, in most professional organizations, 80% of their profits come from 20% of their clients, right? So if you know that, you focus on those 20% of the clients and you really focus a lot of efforts and energy on that, right? Personal example that I'll give you is you wear 20% of your wardrobe 80% of the time, right? We all have our favorite clothes that we all love, right? So what you could do is you can literally go through all your clothes and donate half of them that you never wear. You'll have less stress, less clutter, and it's not going to really change anything you do on a regular basis. So the go-to book, if you want to read about the 80-20 rule, is Living the 80-20 Way by Richard Koch. I'll reference that book a few more times today, but that's something if you want to learn about this rule. And I'm going to talk about this rule again later when I talk about task prioritization. But just so keep the 80-20 rule in mind and please learn more about it if you can. All right, so another thing I want to talk about in terms of being a little bit organized and more productive is to organize your note-taking efforts. Note-taking is an area which many engineering professionals are prone to disorganization. Notepads everywhere, sticky notes all over the office. So I want to give you 3 things here that you can do to take more organized notes. Firstly, you can use a bound notepad for all of your notes and always keep it with you. This is simple and obvious, but it's a very powerful habit to build. If you have to go to a conference, if you have to go to a project site when you get out there in your career, or a coworker's office, you keep the bound notepad with you and excuse me, and always record your notes in it with a date and a location, which makes it easy to go back and find things. I have one on my desk. In fact, the other day I was trying to find something. I went back a few pages, I found it, and I was able to implement. Secondly, you can use a digital notebook or a note-taking system like an Evernote or OneNote, which allows you to share notes across different devices and with different people. And these are especially valuable when you're working remotely on project teams. The third action you can take is to eliminate sticky notes. Most of the time they're scattered and they will only scatter your thoughts. I've used sticky notes. I've had them all over my monitors, all over my desk. However, now I only use them for very specific things like separating papers in a folder and labeling them, or marking pages in a book, or maybe leaving a note for someone, okay? But not for taking important notes of any kind. Another one is your desk. All right, you really want to set your desk up to facilitate the ability to focus, because it does affect your efficiency. And not only that, but if you're working in an office, the appearance of your desk is also a direct reflection upon you. A messy, disorganized desk might leave your supervisor, your staff, or your clients questioning your capability as a professional, in addition to adding that stressful kind of mental clutter to your life. Now, that being said, in the world of engineering, we deal with problems all day long. So to think that anyone's desk will look like the one that I'm showing you on the screen here is just not practical. However, I do highly recommend that you set a reminder to clear your desk at the end of each day. And I promise you this will have a major positive impact on your morning productivity, because you're going to come into the office with a clear head, a clear desk, and you'll be ready to jump into important tasks. A former boss of mine had piles and piles of stuff on his desk, and it looked so bad when clients came to the office. It was really embarrassing. So in addition to the mess kind of affecting your productivity, you could lose clients, or you can, your supervisor may kind of not think fondly of you because of that. And usually your desk, the cleanliness of it has a correlation with productivity, right? So even if you're working remote and someone can't see your desk, it can still impact your productivity negatively. Another point I want to make is to create consistency through routines. I recommend that you implement some kind of regular daily and or weekly routine that you follow consistently. And to take it one step further, you should build in 90-minute blocks of quiet focus time into these routines. This time could be used to focus on mentally demanding tasks. So if you have meetings or you have to have people-related activities, I would try to keep them at the same time and day each week. Right? A predictable routine can really help you to be consistent and establish those pockets of focus time, which will help you to be more productive. In engineering, you're going to need to do a lot of heavy focus work. So if you're constantly being interrupted, then you can't do that work effectively. All right, now I want to get into probably the most important aspect of productivity, which is establishing these MITs. And MIT is known as most important tasks. I learned about them from a book entitled The Power of Less by Leo Babauta, which is a wonderful book. And if you can identify those most important tasks, those tasks that drive the most results, and you do them early in the morning, like you see on this sketch here, then if you get them done, then you can just totally enjoy the rest of your day, right? I consider myself very productive, mainly because of this. I have a whiteboard in my office. Every week I plan all my tasks out. I flag the ones that I consider MITs. I put them up on my whiteboard, and I tend to try to attack them earliest in the days and in the weeks. And then in the afternoons, when I start to get tired, my brain's tired, I'm getting slow, I do tasks that aren't as critical or aren't as important. So that leads to the next question: how do I know which tasks are important? So I'm going to give you this tool here that you can help to prioritize your tasks and figure out your MITs. This is known as the 80-20 chart, and this was also in the book Living the 80-20 Way by Richard Koch. So the axes here are low effort and high effort, and low impact and high impact. So what you're doing with this matrix is you're focusing on the relationship between effort and impact. And I highlighted that earlier with the quote from Peter Drucker as one of the most important aspects of productivity. So basically, those tasks that are high impact and low effort would fall into the red box, which would be your most important tasks, right? Or you might have some tasks that are high effort, high impact, like maybe writing a really big proposal for your company, maybe trying to get a license, like a professional engineering license or certification, or in the UK, becoming a chartered engineer, right? This is a process that takes a lot of effort, but it's going to drive a lot of impact in your career. So those are also most important tasks. And then, like I said, some of these other quadrants that you see, like the green and yellow ones that are low impact tasks, you would try to do them when you're not that fresh, when you're not that productive, because there are going to be things in those boxes that you do have to accomplish. So I have a video on our YouTube channel called How to Use the 80-20 Chart to Supercharge Your To-Do List. And if you want to check that out online, you can go online, you can check it out. And I am actually there with this matrix on a whiteboard, and I'm classifying my events for my tasks for the week just to show you how to use it. And I'll put the name of that video in the chat right now for you. So if you want to look it up, you can, because this is a very powerful process. To go along with all of this in terms of productivity, you want to create some urgency through deadlines. As an engineering professional, it's highly likely that deadlines will already exist for you, but by creating them themselves, you're going to really force yourself and you're going to build accountability into your day. I mean, listen, in school, if your professors didn't give you deadlines, you wouldn't get the work done on time, right? So the same thing has to apply personal. You have to constantly give yourself deadlines to create urgency and keep yourself productive. And the last point that I'm going to make on productivity is you want to organize your email inbox and streamline email processing. I'm not going to be able to get into this today because we don't have time for that. I will just say that one of the best things you could do to streamline your email usage is to check your email certain times of the day and then shut it off outside of those times. By doing that, again, you'll be able to have some pockets of real focus time, and you'll still be able to check your email and get back to people and be responsive. There's a wonderful book on email called A World Without Email. I'm going to type it in the chat right now, A World Without Email by Cal Newport, that talks a lot about how email, text messaging, a lot of these asynchronous Slack, how these types of softwares and tools are really killing our ability to do deep work. And as an engineering professional, we need to do deep work. All right, I'm going to keep going here and just spend a couple minutes on our last point, and then we'll open up for questions. I know we're running tight on time here. I want to talk about effective networking here. Okay. Networking is probably the most important thing in your career. And when I say networking, I like to define it as building relationships. If you think of it as building relationships, it's a little bit easier because sometimes the word networking is scary to engineering professionals. And I want to tell you what networking is not. Networking is not collecting business cards. That's not what it is. A lot of engineering professionals believe that they can go to an event, they can collect a lot of business cards, put them on their desk, and they're networking for the month. That's just not true. Okay, that's the first step in networking when you meet someone initially, whether it's online or in person. All right, that's not networking though, it's step one. What you really need to do is build relationships after that. Why is this important? Because everything in your career is about relationships. Everything. Relationships with your manager, with your colleagues, with your clients, with your customers. You have relationships at home. So if everything in life is about relationships, why wouldn't you want to build them? And some of the benefits that you can take from networking in your career are it can help you to find that mentor and build a relationship with the mentor that we talked about. It can help you at some point in time build in work and build business for your engineering company, which is a straight line to the top of the company. It can help you to meet other technical professionals and gain and learn from them. There's just an unlimited amount of reasons to network and build build relationships in your career. And I can't stress that enough to you. So in person, right? So we want to think about, I gave you some reasons why networking is important. Who do you network with? You should network with people in your industry, people that you think can help you to achieve your goals, and people that you feel that you can help achieve their goals. Networking should be a two-way street. How do you do it effectively? You do it effectively by asking questions and listening to people and building real relationships and being curious. That's how you build strong relationships. And where do you do it? Well, there's a lot of great in-person events, and now I know we're still dealing with COVID, but in-person events are coming back. You can get out there and meet people. There's also abilities to do it online in events like this through organizations like Chain, and there's also social media. And I highly recommend that you all get on LinkedIn and you build a profile and you use it to start to put articles out there, build some thought leadership, and build connections. I can't get too detailed into LinkedIn today either, because we don't have time for that, but I did want to mention it. And so I'm going to open it up to questions now because I wanted to leave some time at the end for that. But before I do that, I want to tell you all a quick story that I like to close a lot of my talks with. I read it in a book once, and it will help you to think about being opportunistic in your career, which all of these skills will help you do. I read this in a book once by Brian Tracy, and I always like to tell it. So once upon a time, there were two shoe salesmen. They worked for two different companies, and both of their companies approached them and said, we're going to send you to a faraway tropical island because we want you to investigate the possibility of expansion. And so the first shoe salesman, he didn't want to go on the trip. He said, this trip is going to be such a waste of time. It's just too far away. The second shoe salesman was excited about the possibility for expansion in that area. So they were both sent to this faraway tropical island. They both did their research and they both sent back an email to their companies. The first shoe salesman, who didn't want to go on the trip, he said, this trip has been an absolute waste of time. He said, there's 0 opportunities here on this island because nobody here even wears shoes. The second shoe salesman, who was excited about the possibilities, he wrote back in his email and he said, this has been an amazing trip. He said, the opportunities on this island are limitless. He said, nobody here even wears shoes. So I tell you that story because it's 2 people, same situation, different mindset, different approach. And I hope that you can remember that story as you go through your engineering career. So with that, I want to thank you for your time today. I thank you to Chain for having me. I'm going to open it up here for questions. And I want to remind you that if you visit our website at engineeringmanagementinstitute.org, you can have all of the free resources that we do have available for you, including our podcasts, our YouTube channels, and many, many free articles that are constantly being written by engineers on a weekly basis. All right.
Thank you so much, Anthony.
Yeah, absolutely, Mario. What questions do we have today? Do we have time for questions or do we need to wrap it up?
We have about 5 minutes if you're happy
great.
to answer some questions. And thank you very much for all your insights. It's been quite an interesting talk. Even I took quite a few points for myself from this, really. And I will probably change my mindset, how I'm looking at things as well from this. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
One question, probably I need to rephrase this a little bit. Do you think it would be better to concentrate on finding the right mentor as an engineering student rather than concentrating on developing your professional skills or qualification? So this is sort of saying, I think, is it better to find a mentor very early on before you even specialize in a certain area? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think at any time in your life, in your career, you should have a mentor because at every time in your career, you're trying to accomplish something, right? So when you start your career, you're trying to find your way. You're trying to figure out which path in your discipline you want to go into, what skills to develop. They can help you do that. And then once you start developing the skills, they can help you with the next step. So I think that there's always a good reason to have a mentor in your career. And I think that you should do it at all times because you're always focused on something and there's someone who can help you with that.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Murat, if I just on the topic of mentors, if I could just add one thing to that very quickly. I'd be interested to get your thoughts on the following, Anthony. So some years ago, whilst I was working towards my professional registration in the UK, I sought out a mentor on 2 occasions, and on both occasions, they, shall we say, they tried to curb my enthusiasm for what I was trying to do, and it largely demoralized me, and I lost a lot of confidence from it. And so that whole process, as a result, I worked through myself and I did it without a mentor. I've since found a mentor to help in other aspects of my career. But I'm just wondering, what advice would you give to someone who's encountered something similar and is perhaps a bit unsure or lacking in confidence of how to find the right mentor?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, we had a similar type of question before with the bad mentoring experience. And I would kind of offer similar advice in that, first of all, recognize that that's not the right person for you. If they're, listen, it's one thing if a mentor says, hey, listen, I really don't think this is the best approach for you. Maybe try something else, as opposed to someone really trying to just say, don't do this at all, So I think you have to recognize it's not the right person. I think also you have to learn from the experience. And if it was a bad experience, reflect on it, think about why it was bad, and then try to make changes the following when you find the next mentor. But I think to Gary's point as well, if you have a goal, you're clear on it, and you're dedicated to it, those things are not going to get in your way. Obviously, Gary overcame that. He went up and ended up doing it himself. And sometimes it's what you just have to do. And I would just say that if you get discouraged, as long as you stay focused on your goals, you're going to eventually get to them, similar to Gary's story there. So I would just say, learn from every experience. Every mentoring experience might not be a good one. And if you're trying to pick the right mentor, like I said earlier, keep trying to find people that have gone down the specific roadway or path that you want to go down, because those are the best people to help you.
Okay, brilliant. Murat, I'll pass back to you.
Okay, excellent. Anthony, one question I've got is, you mentioned this 80-20 rule, obviously the Pareto rule, and benefits of focusing on what really matters. How will we really know what really matters the most, or has the higher impact than other tasks we have at hand? How can we know that what really is in that 20%?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Like, how do you know what's important, especially when you're younger in your career? And that also could be, a mentor could help you with that. I think one of the things that you can do to identify that is, what are any kind of measurables that you can look at, or what are any kind of consequences from it? So for example, as a business owner, let's say if I'm looking at my client base and I recognize that 2 of my clients account for 80% of the income of our company, that's a clear-cut indicator that any work with them is extremely impactful and I should focus on them. If you feel in your career that an engineering license or becoming chartered is going to really give you opportunities, then you should really focus on that task, right, as your number one thing. So I guess the answer to that is to try to really understand the impact of something. You could think about what would happen if you achieve that goal. And if you do that, that'll go a long way in kind of helping you decide if it's impactful or not. And if you have a question about it, ask someone with experience, because they can help you with that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
I would also just say too, just to go back to this slide as we start to wrap up, is remember that, you got a lot of information here today, which I hope will be helpful for you. And I think that you need to take the information and take steps with it now. That's important. If you don't take steps with this information, it's not going to be helpful for you. Not just the information I give, but the information all the other speakers are giving today. So please, even if it's just one thing you do, make a note of it and do it. That's the only way to build success in your career.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Anthony. I think this is the only time we have got for the questions. Now we will leave the rest to the panel discussion.